Well, sisters and brothers of the trade union movement, Armahan Hainux, ar san me van Céile Saivin, tá firkin fúlsir ó Viljug, agus a gohairithe an lo specialta ina bhfuil mit a cosúir a Céile Céad Law the me bealtana. And I think I'm so pleased that so many of you are able to be here this afternoon. And in a way as well, because this particular week is such a special week that you have organised so many significant events to encourage people to recognise the new circumstances in which the trade union movement is and where and how it can be dealt with. I have to say this is my final May Day in Áras and Uachtaráin, and there are no other group I would have liked to have spent May Day with than my colleagues in the trade union movement. It is one of the most important days in the year. I find it fascinating in a way that people stress about it. Of course, it represents the beginning of spring, and it's also important in certain religious circumstances. But why should they have the slightest reluctance in saying it is one of the great days for celebration by the trade union movement across the planet, no matter the circumstances and wherever they are? And for me, that is what's very important when you look back historically at how May Day has been used. It was it's one of public spectacle. It's associated with a certain kind of music. It's associated with the emergence of the great Labour songs and associated with music in public and all of that. So I'm very pleased that Kevin Callan, Senator Secretary General of Force, so many of you are here and you're so welcome. Justin McCampbell, I'm the President of ICTU, and Shay Cody, President of the Irish Labour History Society, which reminds me, I must put it on my list for the Article 28 meeting. It's one of the few organisations that has not been getting the money that it should have got in relation to historians, so I must put that down. Now, this week is being called, as I said, you have organised a number of events. It's been called Trade Union Week. A week organised by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions to highlight the importance of unions and the critical role that they play. People always used to say, and it is so important, of defending the rights of workers at home and abroad and around the world, but of also defining the new role that the trade union movement is now playing in defining the economy. I welcome the opportunity to highlight my support again for the campaign, why it's better in a trade union and why there's power in a union. It's very interesting that it has been, when I was an academic, writing about this, about how it has never been properly analysed, the conflict between individualism and collective. People were almost afraid of the collective. This is the long Irish antipathy to the state. There must be something wrong. As far back as 1881, Bishop Nulty of Meath was because he had suggested that there was no such thing as an absolute poverty that didn't have responsibility, that it was communistic. Why should people be afraid of the word collective? It is the great challenge, the idea that, for example, that the economics of suggested by the collective are different from the economics suggested by individualism. The suggestion that there should be no limit of any kind on acquisition and the concentration of wealth and its abuse and power. I've been a supporter of the trade union movement because it's just part of one story that I am a member of trade union members for 60 years now. I think I started with the ESBOA, and then I moved on to the FWI, to the WI, then the FWI, and then finally SIPTO. But you're all so welcome on this special day. And even though it is important to celebrate nature and celebrate all of the others, it is above all else for me very important. It is the day that trade unionists and workers all over the world celebrate. It's a proud tradition. I remember when I came to Galway, in many cases, first I was 19, but looking at the Dockers band, for example, which didn't have much resources, but because it turned out on May Day, and that idea of working together, that's very much inspired the poem I wrote for Mary McPartland. Is about that. It's about the whole strength and the exhilaration that people, encouragement that people give each other. And I think that in that regard, this year is a very special year, celebrating the 25th anniversary of the introduction of a minimum wage in Ireland. That 25 years ago was a milestone for the trade union movement. And it's a powerful example of showing how the economy must be embedded in the politics and values of a society. It was very, very interesting when I say that embedded in the society. I think it is 1931, Karl Polanyi produced The Great Transformation, in which he describes about everything about economics in policy is embedded. Its implications for policy is embedded in the wider society. I'm going to Kilmallock show in the 17th, I think, to speak about the Great Famine. And it is very interesting that in looking at preparing that speech, something that struck me about it was Edmund Burke, even, for example, regarded the Irish as inferior because they weren't up to understanding the fact that they knew kind of calculation that was involved. And Archbishop Whately, after whom the Whately Chair in Trinity is called, had his own instruction manual for teaching the peasants about money. And do have a fire comment then of Nassau Senior where he says he doubts if an act of providence that has wiped out 1 million of them will be sufficient to bring the Irish up to standard. Now, that connection, if you like, the interesting thing about one of the things about poor people around the world in their history is that they had a sense of the collective. It's why people say we have very little, but we'll share it with you. And they did it instinctively. It was an expression of their humanism. It's the total antithesis of extreme individualism. Anyway, I must just make a few points here, is that since Sabina and I arrived here in 2011, we had the great privilege of being able to participate in putting a number of tributes to particular people who played an important role in the trade union's illustrious history here in Ireland. Many of them are pieces of art, the planting of trees. I think what is the triplet tree we planted to Tom Johnson is one. I think one of the things about Tom Johnson, which was why it's very, very important. We're just exactly 102 years past the 1923 Commission on the Future of Agriculture. There was a big decision to be made. There was about 1.3 million acres still around the big houses to be divided. What was to happen to it? There was a commission, and the majority commission more or less said it's too late to stop the march of the graziers. But Tom Johnson and Mr. Duffy produced a minority report, and they spoke about how you would be able to provide jobs for the agricultural labourers. You could use the horticultural capacity that was around the big houses to develop projects for the local markets. People could work in the houses and so forth. But the majority report, when we look at the transcript, it says it's too late to stop the cattlemen now. And that is a case, really, of where, if you like, in the case of the famine, a famine happened because of economic ideological doctrine. Equally, in the cases, the people who'd got land and didn't get land at the foundation of the state was facilitated in that kind of thinking in 1923. I think it is very, very important that we are able to celebrate something else. We celebrated the 1913 lockout of Dublin workers, in which we have an installation here, and it celebrates the Citizen Army, and it celebrates Sean O'Casey. And let us hope it gives a bit of courage to those who in fact are trying to appropriately. Sean O'Casey is the great playwright and writer associated with Dublin and associated with the workers of the world. The object we have, which we'll have a look at later on, was in fact called The Plough and the Stars. It's an art object in collaboration with John Behan, former national ploughing champion Jerry King, who donated the plough itself, and the Office of Public Works, who put it all together for us. And the piece is based on a Wexford Star plough manufactured in the 1930s by the Wexford Engineering Company. We've also planted 16 memorial birch trees in honour of those executed in 1916. It's very interesting that that was one of the requests that were made at the last part of the meeting of the first Dole. I think as well, we also had a sculpture exhibition associated with the government's plans for celebrating 1916. The People's Acorn was part of the 1916 centenary celebrations, and it involved collaboration between a sculptor, teachers, children, and it is so I'm so pleased it is there. And I think that all of these will be there when Sabina and I have left next November. I think that I want to talk about your own campaign. I think it is incredibly important, and I think it's important to realise as well. As I have said, and we're 25 years of the minimum wage and so forth. When I'm giving speeches about food security in Africa, I've been talking about how the basics should be met. Food, education, gender equality. So that all helps, in fact, change the character of the leadership that is available. But it is exactly the same way. There is no time, and there should be no encouragement for people saying is that the people who are at the lowest level of income must be the victims of the economy. There is something wrong with the economy. And one of the great things about, since I came here in 2011, to have had the opportunity of being able to join the new writing that is there in economics. We've had people who visited us here, and I think there were really gave wonderful contributions. We had heat, greed and human need in relation to discussion about the connection between ecology, economy, justice and society. Among the people that I've dealt with here are Tim Jackson, Ian Goff, Anna Coote, the whole, not just the sustainable, but the basic services that are necessary. Mariana Mazzucato, Sylvia Walby, Kate Rowat, Peter Kirby, Mary Murphy from Maynooth, many others. And all that new thinking is there. But the important thing about it, in many cases, this isn't an academic exercise. It's about a campaign of citizens to show that, in fact, the economy is embedded in politics. And the politics that matter are ones that say that, in fact, those who are at the lowest rung in most cases mustn't carry the burden of the excesses at the top of the tree. And that means in many, many cases as well, that it is just a great time. Already everyone agrees that in relation to where the state is participating with the employers and the trade unions, some of the best papers are coming from the trade union movement, because it isn't just a matter about defending individual things in individual workplaces. It's about how are we going to live and what will be the balance between ecology, economy, justice, eliminating poverty, food security. And there's a kind of a deadly thing going on, is that we should all look for our education and our morality from the television every evening. We, in fact, actually, you may make the society. And therefore, I think that the campaign must be about telling all the individual workers about the dignity of work. It's very, 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 very interesting, because at his funeral just a few days ago, Pope Francis said, there is no good society without a good union. And there's no good union that is not reborn every day in the peripheries that does not transform the economy's rejected stones into its cornerstones. And that's all very encouraging. So it's a very good time, and you are all welcome on this May Day, that it isn't just only us recalling as we have through the symbols and the glorious, the great courage of those. I know the people who were called this, that and the other. When I entered politics in 1969, the Red Scare was on. It's very important that people know what it was like. A candidate standing against me from one of the two big parties holds up his rosary beads and said, if you listen to the man who's coming after me, you're not voting for, not supporting him, and so forth. And it was a deadly, deadly conservatism that infected every aspect of Irish life, housing and health and education and spirituality itself. I think that it is a great time, and I think something very practical. I mentioned the new kind of writing, but there's the good unit, the good work that's going on in just transition. And that's what's very, very important, of turning every member into an activist who can see the joy of collective behaviour. And it's something like that that will stop us, I think, from regressing back on those one moment of hope that was there in 2015 on the Sustainable Development Goals. The idea about it is that there are some circumstances now that in fact will justify holding back on giving additional resources to the lowest rungs in our economy, towards even making a planet possible for future generations to come. So it's a great time for activism. And I think the trade union movement is not only a great tradition, and we celebrate the courage of those who were isolated in the past and those who stood firm, but also the quiet work of organisation by shop stewards and others. And it's a great time full of possibilities. And I want to, as President of Ireland, to wish you all on this May Day 2025 every success in every aspect of your campaign, because it's what will give us the best possible hope for the future economy, justice and ecology. Fáilte róg, you're all most welcome.